why nuclear energy, especially after what happened in Japan? And why molten salt reactor? And why thorium? And last but not the least, why China is the first one to eat the crab? That's Chinese saying. So I tend to give you explanation for two of them. Why nuclear energy in China, but I would very much like to leave why molten salt reactor, why thorium with the conference. We have so many experts around the world to have a discussion on that topic. My name is Mianheng Jiang. I'm currently the president of Shanghai branch, Chinese Academy of Sciences. I used to be the vice president of Chinese Academy of Sciences in Beijing for 12 years and responsible for the technology-related research and development. And I'm also in charge of the TMSR project in China, which is a pioneer initiative of Chinese Academy of Sciences dealing with the thorium fuel cycle and molten salt reactor from within the Academy of Sciences. In national labs, we have roughly 50,000 staff and employees, basically composed of researchers, professors, and technicians, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, we also offer 50,000 graduate students PhD degrees and master degrees. And the Shanghai Institute of Applied Physics is one of them, affiliated with the Academy. And the Institute is focused on nuclear science and technology. And recently, the Academy of Sciences launched a pioneer initial program. It's called Thorium Molten Salt Reactor Project, 100% financed by our central government. China, as of today, is the second largest economy in the world. In the next few decades, China will add even more GDP in the world economy. But however, China is still in the stage of its urbanization processes. As you can see from the chart, the urbanization rate of China is only 40-some%. What in the US is almost 99%. And even in Korea, it's more than 90%. So that's the given. Even we are the second largest economy in the world, but we are still in the stage of the urbanization evolution of processes. On the other hand, that has something to do with the urbanization, which means that China's economy is still in the stage of industrialization. If you can see from this chart, our GDP composition, the 45 to 50% of our economy is related to the industry. The traditional industry. But in terms of the energy per capita, China, if you compare with Japan and the US is right here, and Japan is right here. And per capita usage of the energy in China is still way below what US and Japan consumed. We are still in the stage of the urbanization at the ratio of 40-some%, which given rise to a huge demand for the materials. And you can see here, that is the turning point. So from then on, the requirement, the need, the demand for the raw materials, for example, in this case, is copper, which is a commodity which China does not have enough supply, will turn to be a exponentially high requirement or demand, which we have to import from either Australia or Chile or someone else other than China. So that gives us a energy security issue. We can only supply domestically that much energy, but we have a huge gap. We rely on outside China, or we can develop ourselves if we can find a way to do that. The coal is still a major energy for China, and this is the oil, and this is natural gas, and this is what we call renewable energy, including hydro, wind, and nuclear. And I must say, among this segment, the hydro is the major part of it. It's not a nuclear at all. How do we meet this gap? It's a huge challenge for China. To 2030, for US, the rely on the import of oil accounts for like 50% of their domestic demand. But China is going to be 75%. 75%, it's a very scary number, right? And for the natural gas, US, by 2030, it's pretty much independent. But for the European countries, you also have a very security issue, energy security issue here. For oil, there's much higher dependence on the foreign import, and even for the gas. And plus, recently, the US announces that they have a largest reserve of the shale gas. They almost, they can export oil or gas. So in our situation, China, by 2030, we end up with the scenario that we need we'll rely on foreign import of our energy. So another thing is about the climate change. So this is a picture, Copenhagen Climate Summit. China made a commitment at that meeting that the unit GDP energy consumption will be reduced by 40 to 45% compared to 2005 level of China. The non-fossil energy accounts for 15% of primary energy by 2020, and currently is less than, if I remember correctly, 5%. This is another issue that people talk about many years ago, but all of a sudden we don't hear that talk anymore. I don't know why, but China made a commitment anyway. So in about less than 10 years, our energy consumption intensity got to be reduced tremendously. And plus, we have to rely on a substantial part of the energy composed of renewable energy. So this is the Beijing look like when I grew up there 30-some years ago. And this is today. So that's why after 12 years in Beijing, I moved back to Shanghai. Part of a reason. And if you look at the UK, this is today. So I must say, for 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing, we made an extra special effort to make the sky look like that for a very short period of time. But we are so impressed with London last Olympic. Congratulations. So that's why we need to worry about our air pollution for our own sake, not quite for the IPCC report. People always talk about China's consumption of energy and the emission of the CO2 as the largest quantity of the world. But I would add something here. As we can see from this chart, this is the GDP of the US, and this is the input, this is the export of the US, and this is China's GDP for last year, okay? I forgot to put the year on it. You can see from this chart, China export more than import, which means the export is more energy consumed, but we import the goods, which is less energy consumed. So in that regard, the consumption of the energy in China is not totally for China, but for the world. But in US, they import more than they export, which means they import more goods which made up more energy consumed. So which means the US, not only per capita wise the highest energy consumption country, but also take advantage of other countries to make import of the goods, which is more energy consumed in other countries rather than in the US. So that's why, if you look at here, so this is the US, the per capita energy consumption right here. In China, even the second largest economy in the world, we are still way below what US consumed and Japan consumed. And even more than that is the US transportation plus residential per capita is much higher than Chinese transportation and residential per capita energy consumption here. So which means a lot of the energy used here in China is not for consume, it's for production. So given the situation I just described, China is in the urbanization stage. China is still in the industrialization processes. So those kind of scenario requires a high density energy. And to be honest, given the land size that we have, divided by the population, 1.4 billion, so land is a scarce resource for China. So we need a high density energy. Here, the photovoltaic, something right here, and coal, oil. I think nuclear must be somewhere here. So that is why we need nuclear energy. Of course, China also is a rich solar country. Most of them in the west part of China, coincidentally, in that area we have a lot desert, which growing nothing but sunshine. Probably we can turn that area into a solar factory. Probably very true in the future. If we take a look at the global solar installed capacity, the total for 2011, the total solar capacity installed is like 70 gigawatts. The total capacity of the production worldwide is 60 gigawatts. And China accounts for 60% of it. So the 40 gigawatts production capacity is in China. For those installations, Germany is a typical example that they already accounts for almost 20% of their electricity. Germany has been successfully deployed the solar electricity to compensate the valley and the peak. So if you take that into the consideration, the electricity generated by photovoltaic or by solar in general in Germany accounts for almost 40%, which is a proven fact that solar can do something really. But in China, we install only less than 1% of our electricity. When I present this figure, I just want to say, in terms of the solar, I will say even this is the downturn and very slow time for solar industry, but I will believe that solar still has a bright future in many places. And solar is nuclear energy anyway. So in that regard, we still go back to the nuclear energy. And is there a harbor peak? There's a lot of talk about harbor peak. And are we here? People say we are already over past the harbor peak. And someone say we never get the harbor peak. But in any case, solar is the nuclear energy. So we can take advantage of it. And why I show this picture? Because the AP1000 is also called the third generation nuclear reactor technology. Was the first one to eat the crab, China. They've been talking about the AP1000 back in 2005. The technology was developed by Westinghouse, at that time a US company, and later on changed the owner to Toshiba Japan. And when China and Westinghouse was negotiating, was talking about the deployment of the AP1000, there is no one in the US deploy that technology. I was visiting the DOE at that time. I actually was asking a specific question, why US did not apply this technology in the US? The answer was Vegas. But to the end, China actually signed a contract with Westinghouse in 2007. So we start to negotiate, and the project finally kicked off 2 years ago. So recently, US also approved another 4 units of AP1000 in Georgia State. That's the new nuclear power station project ever been approved since 3 Miles accident. So which is a good sign. Even more important, the improvement was given after the Japan's accident. As I said previously, China made a commitment by 2020, the renewable energy has to be accounts for 15% of the primary energy. So how do we do that? I think one of the major action, now we talk about the action, the Chinese government has taken is to have a more nuclear power station installment in China. So by 2020, we are supposed to have a 70 gigawatts. Currently, we have a 10 gigawatts. And here, just in this single site, we'll have a 6 units of 1.25 gigawatts nuclear power station. So by 2015, we are supposed to have a 40 gigawatts, and by 2020 is 70 gigawatts. The number after 2020 is even bigger, but I doubt that will be reality. I don't know yet, but this is we can foreseeable that 40 gigawatts by 2050 is for sure, and the 2020 70 gigawatts we will see. So then the why thorium. I better leave this topic with the conference, but at least I think China is the second largest reserve. In addition to that, the nuclear fuel cycle, I quote this from a well-known paper here. I personally think that there is still an argument about whether the thorium can be burned that clean. But for sure, uranium cannot be that clean. I mean, the deep burning. So with less fission elements and so on and so forth. Again, I will leave this with the conference. I'm sure you will have a more discussion on that topic. And why MSR? And this is the chart given by a U.S. colleagues. They would like to call FHR rather than the MSR. But I think it's about the same thing. FHR stands for fluoride high temperature reactor, and we call molten salt reactor. It's about the same. So obviously the advantage of this is clear. We not only have a low pressure here, which gives you more safety, we also end up with the high cooling temperature here. And as far as energy is concerned, we need high temperature. Because nuclear power station not only generate the electricity, but we also can take advantage of the high temperature if you can go as high as 900 degrees C or even higher. Then we can use this energy to produce the hydrogen. Once we have the hydrogen, then we can convert the CO2, which is not the waste at all. Is a raw material for our chemicals, in fact, if we can collect them. But we need the high temperature. In general, we need the energy to convert them. So that's what we call the hybrid energy system. We've already done many pilot projects, and some of them are already industrialized. For example, the coal to liquid fuel project, we've been successfully finished those projects. So those are not just a pilot plant, it's an industrialized scale plant. And the technology and the catalysts are all developed by the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Once we have the electricity generated by the nuclear power station, which is clean, then we hope that we can drive the car by electricity. I'm sure some of you have already seen this. In 1994, the state of California passed the law of the zero emissions. And GM's EV1 came out in 1996 because they very much like to catch the market of the California. The big oils, but heavily lobbying East Coast, especially the New England area, not to follow the same track as California did. The big oil was successfully doing that. So finally, GM called back all the EV1s from the market and crashed them in 2004. It's something to me like World War II NAS. It's amazing. It's very scary story here. So with a lesson like that, and what happened in China, we used to have a dream, if we can produce a clean electricity, then we can drive our electrical car. Here is the total carbon fiber EV developed. It's a pure electrical car developed by Chinese Academy of Sciences. However, if you look at this, as of today, the capacity of the production capability in China is over that of the United States. We have a 20 million units production capacity. It's over the United States. So the gasoline car here in China is everywhere. If you look at this national holiday, right? It's all gasoline cars. So it makes our job even impossible to convert the gasoline car into the electrical car. So we also have our big oils here and all GMs here. How do we overcome the difficulty the obstacle in front of us in order to push the green economy. Again, we need a revolutionary something happen even in this part of the world. Or we have a dream. Finally, even the economy is globalized, but each country has its own security issue, like energy security issue. So we very much like to be energy independent. Use nuclear or even solar to produce the electricity that we need. Then we can save the coal used to be used for the production of electricity to convert the coal into the chemicals that meet our normal needs. Then we can save the oil we have to import. So that gave us a possibility of the energy independence. And then we'll also at the same time give rise to a green economy. And at the same time can create a lot new kind of jobs. For example, if the major two things I'm thinking of, if we can convert all the gasoline car into EV cars, not to use the cover of the car, not to use stainless steel, but carbon fibers, then we can reduce tremendously the quantity of the import of the raw materials from countries other than China. And another driving force will be high-speed train. If we can build up a network of the high-speed train nationwide, I mean, this kind of transition can in fact change the structure of the economy. And at the same time, will create more jobs, for sure. We need that. And I wish the conference will give a good answer and solutions to the question why thorium and why molten salt reactor. I wish the conference a real success. Thank you.